everyone. Dr. Shanice Jones Cameron here, and welcome back to the Her Guided Evolution podcast. Today, I am joined by a special guest, Dr. Sherita Gaskins-Tillett. Dr. Sherita Gaskins-Tillett is a board-certified OBGYN, mother, wife, wellness enthusiast, and event planner. After several years of trying to meet the demands of family, career, and community, she found herself exhausted and lost in her own life. Fortunately, a well-timed vacation provided the awakening she needed to realize that the life she was living was not sustainable. She returned home on a journey of self-discovery that resulted in a reordering of her priorities and a complete overhaul of her professional life. She is now able to show up as the wife, mother, physician, and friend she wants to be. In conversations with colleagues and friends and through social media musings, she realized that she was not the only professional woman feeling tired, lost, and less than. Dr. Sherita is on a mission to empower women to create lives that they love. Recognizing that there is strength in community and desiring to normalize the struggle, she founded the Boss Lady Dream Builders Facebook group, where she helps professional women who want to connect with like-minded sisters, rediscover their priorities, reclaim the reins of their lives, and find balance so they can live with more joy, authenticity, and purpose. She is also the host of She Built It, Boss Lady Chronicles, a weekly show that features the stories of women who are owning their power to build the life of their dreams. Dr. Sherita also hosts virtual and live events for professional women. Her signature event, A Weekend for Me, is a 3-day cocoon for busy women to indulge in radical self-care, rediscover their bliss, and be inspired to chart a course to their ideal future. So thank you so much, Dr. Sherita. So glad to have you here. Welcome to the Her Guided Evolution podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, I am as well. So we'll go ahead and dive in. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey? Tell us about your childhood, perhaps, how you ended up going into medicine. We'd love to hear just a bit about you.
Yeah, so I've always been fascinated by things related to medicine. I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but there was a TV show back, I think, in the late 70s called Emergency 911. And that was one of my favorite shows. I like to watch it. I enjoyed the excitement of it, the excitement of everything that was going on, and especially the medical aspect of it. And I did not have any doctors in my family, so there were no tangible role models outside of maybe my pediatrician, but I just always loved things related to medicine. And then but I'm not sure at that point that I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I don't know that I ever said those words as a child. When I went to high school, I actually studied biology, and I think that's when I fell in love with studying the human body and human physiology. At about the same time, I also discovered psychology. And so I love the way the mind worked as well. So I really, was torn between medicine and psychology, or integrating the two with psychiatry. And in undergrad, I decided to study psychology. So my undergraduate degree is actually in psychology. But I still always kept my options open and did all of the prerequisites for medical school. And after undergrad, I worked for a few years and then decided to go back to school and become a physician.
Nice. So I wanted to, and thank you for sharing. I wanted to just kind of backtrack to something that you mentioned, how you said that there were no doctors in your family. And I could definitely relate. I'm the first person, the first person in my family to earn a PhD. And so one of the things I wanted to just kind of circle back to is, given that you mentioned that you didn't have a lot of representation of doctors and no doctors in your family, what was kind of that path like to journeying to earn a doctorate and move a little bit further in your generation, considering there were no doctors in your family?
Yeah, it's really interesting question to ponder, because when you don't have ready role models, I'd like to tell people that my journey was a series of uninformed decisions. So, you see this shiny object i.e., doctor, be a doctor. But do you really know what that means? I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew I wanted it. It seemed like a worthy calling, right? So I loved studying the body. It made sense to me. But actually, you go to medical school and you're there for 4 years and you're studying the body and all of the different disciplines within medicine. And then you have to make a decision about a residency program. You don't know what that really means either because you've only spent a week or two looking at it during medical school. So you choose a residency, you go through however long the residency is, and go into a profession still without knowing. So for me, again, I say medicine was a series of uninformed decisions and kind of charting, I talk about this with other kind of first generation doctors, that we just had to chart our own courses through things, and probably the hard knocks. And so hopefully the next generation will be in a better place because at least we can offer some guidance and some advice, that wasn't available to us.
I love that. And that is part of my research is I think about how oftentimes a lot of African Americans, and not just African Americans, like more broadly across the African diaspora, oftentimes we will kind of have like um, this collective view of like health, wellness, and the world. And African American epistemologies often say that we have like the that we oftentimes want to ensure that it's not just us who we are elevating, but we are elevating others and using our gifts to help others and kind of thinking back generationally as well as forward, and just kind of finding our place within kind of that lineage. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. So I wanted to kind of get into your kind of path that maybe not totally went in the opposite direction of medicine, but you added on to being a physician. And part of the reason why I'm curious about this is because I think a lot of women may hear and see that you are a physician, you're a medical doctor, you're an OBGYN, you have a family, you have a husband, you have a full life already. You have a full life. So some women would kind of look at that and be like, why is she adding something else on? How is she adding something else on? What's going on here? So could you like just kind of tell us about your about that?
I love this question because I think that at the end of the day, what it boils down to is I am not defined by any one period of time in my life, is how I look at it. That I have purpose for each season, and sometimes the season is over, sometimes it requires transition. And I learned this the hard way, like the other lessons. So probably about 10 years ago or so now, I was a new wife, a new mother, and working as a full-time OBGYN. And I didn't mention that I'm married to a pastor, so a pastor's wife. So that comes with a whole nother layer of, duties and responsibilities if you know anything about being a pastor's wife. So, so I was, trying to do all the things, trying to be mother of the year, wife of the year, doctor of the year, and I was completely exhausted. And I guess in hindsight, probably somewhat burned out. And I realized I had this life that on the outside looked like, a dream, like everything I'd ever wanted. But on the inside, I was drowning. I wasn't enjoying anything. I was an older mother. I was only seeing my baby 2 hours a day. And so it really, was just kind of depressing that this is my life. And I mentioned, or you mentioned in my bio that I went on a vacation, and I realized I was sitting on the beach alone, and I realized that I was hearing my own voice for the first time in a really long time, and it was saying, "This is not sustainable. You are not well." And so right there on the beach, I pulled out my phone. I started Googling what it meant to be well, wellness, mind, body, and spirit. And I came home and just started studying lots and lots of things. And I would like to say that I took the initiative to make changes, but really what happened was simultaneously, As I was going through this, personal development journey, there were some changes that were happening in the practice. And after a point, it became obvious that I wasn't going to be able to remain there, that I was going to need to make a change. This was not an easy decision for me because this practice, I loved my practice, I loved my patients, I loved the people I worked with. But the disconnect really came at an administrative level, a level outside of us. And so, like I said, it became obvious that I was going to need to leave. Initially, when I made that decision, I was so sad because I imagined myself staying there for the duration of my career. I saw myself retiring from that. And also, I had been telling myself there is no other job that's going to pay well enough to cover your lifestyle and your loans. I graduated with a massive amount of student loan debt. And so, I thought this was what I had to do. But at the same time, I had been going through this other journey. So after I regrouped a little bit, I realized, well, wait a minute, this might actually be an opportunity because I'm telling myself that there are no other jobs that will pay well enough, but I actually had never investigated, right? I just assumed, I made lots of assumptions. So I started investigating and found all kinds of other options within OBGYN and outside of OBGYN. So actually initially I pivoted into what's called OBGYN, a laborist position. So that's someone who covers labor and delivery. It's more shift work. So I worked a total of 36 hours per week. And so that actually was a game changer because before I was doing 24-hour calls and seeing patients in the office, I was working easily 60 hours a week. So I went from 60 to 36 for roughly the same money. So, but again, that wouldn't even have been available to me had I not bothered to question my assumptions. Yeah, and so that kind of opened the floodgates, if you will. So once I realized, okay, well, I was making all kinds of assumptions about life and about my possibilities and my prospects. What are other areas where maybe I'm making those same kinds of assumptions or, doing things in a way that maybe aren't serving me the way that they need to because I haven't bothered to ask questions or because I'm afraid to step outside of the comfort zone. And so it just kind of, caused a domino effect. So at this point now, I call myself the pivot queen. So after a while, if I'm in a place that I don't feel is serving me or is out of line with my priorities, then I pivot or I try to make modifications, but I don't just stay in a place that's not working. And that could be a relationship, that can be a job, it can be a friendship, but we have to honor ourselves and our personhood. We only get one life and you want to enjoy it. I believe that we were meant to live abundant lives, and I don't want to spend any minute doing something that's not aligned with my core values and my priorities. Because when I thought about back then, when I initially pivoted, I think the main issue was that my priorities had changed, but my schedule had not. So I continued to work the same schedule of a single, or, well, not a single, just as an OBGYN, but what was for me a single OBGYN schedule. But I added a husband and a child. But still I didn't cut back in any area. I just kept piling on. And I think we as women, we put on our superwoman cape and we put our head down and we just get to work. But I think we need to start giving ourselves permission to make modifications, to do things that work for us. And so, if I'm honest, that while I didn't want to leave my job, that schedule did not work for my life anymore, not the life that I wanted. I wanted to spend time with my baby. I wanted to spend time with my husband, and that life didn't really allow for it in a qualitative way. Because, like I said, when I was at home, I was tired. I really just wanted to be asleep. And, it was almost like I was numb, as far emotionally and everything. I couldn't enjoy things because I was just that exhausted.
Yes. Oh my gosh. There's just you just give us so much in what you just said when you talked about like seasons of life. And I just love that perspective because it's just like coming in and giving yourself permission as well as setting the expectation that you are going to change and that's okay. And I know for me, and other folks who may be very familiar with like, anxiety and things like that, change and shifting, that can be really scary. So I wonder like how, if you had fear, I don't want to assume, but if there were fears around like these transitions, how did you manage that for anyone who may be thinking like, okay, like this is a philosophy that I can get with, but how do you kind of like manage the fear surrounding that if you had and were experiencing
Oh
fear?
yeah, lots and lots of fear, and I still experience fear, but I do it afraid. So that's the first thing. I do it
Yeah.
afraid. The second thing is I have found a community. So I guess during the pandemic, I discovered coaching. And I have hired several coaches over the years, and I think at this point, I don't know if I'll ever be without a coach. I think right now I might have three or four. So, in different areas of my life.
Yes.
But it helps me so much because you have that support, and then you also have someone to help talk through things to keep you moving, to keep you in momentum. Because I think, we have these ideas and things that we want to accomplish in life, but if we keep doing everything the way we've always done it, we don't develop new mindsets, we don't develop new habits, we're going to get the same result. So it's not enough to want something to be different. We actually have to take action steps to do something different. And I found lots and lots of support in the coaching communities that I'm in. And so, it helps so much just to normalize things. I'll tell you a story with my business coaching. So initially, I started off online with this coach, and I loved it. But I'm an introverted introvert, believe it or not, and so
Same.
I never came on camera. I didn't talk very much, and this was before my business was really a business. I was doing business coaching. I was there, and I'm looking at all of these amazing, incredible people. My coach announced that she was having an in-person event. I was super excited. Okay, I'm there. I get to see everybody in person. So then the night before it's time to go, I'm thinking, what are you doing? These people have real businesses. You are a joke. You have no business whatsoever going to this thing. And I just, like went into this tailspin about how I didn't belong there. And I mean, it was just crazy. So my compensation for that was overpacking. So if you could have seen the bags and bags that went with me on that trip, just because it's what I needed to do to feel a little bit more comfortable. But I got there and I met the people and I heard their stories and I was able to connect with them, and I realized that there were far more similarities between us than there were differences. And the people that I admired, I saw them crying, I saw them vulnerable, and I realized they had the same struggles, the same fears and insecurities and things that I dealt with. And so, just having that community, being able to see people at different levels, but also being able to see the commonality. I think that's what keeps me going because, I've seen it. I can see people who are where I am now and see where they've been, where they've gone to. And so it just inspires me really to keep going.
Uh, Thank you so much for sharing. You may have noticed I was just like tearing up a little bit as you were talking because that's when you're kind of in that train of thought and train of thinking like, what am I doing? I'm a joke. I'm not these things. I'm not those things. I think it could be very difficult to break out of that mindset. And so I really appreciate you sharing that story in part because one, you still went, you didn't back out, you didn't say, well, you know what, it's just this isn't happening. So we're gonna go in a different
That
direction.
close. Actually, you know what?
That is so
I'm going to really
understandable.
be vulnerable here. So it was actually probably my 9-year-old life coach that that kind of snapped me out of it, aka my daughter. And I wasn't saying anything, but like I said, I'm running around frantic, packing and overpacking and just like going through something in my head. And she says, "Mom, calm down. What's wrong with you? You're a doctor. you're something else. She's like, and you have some money. You're fine. But I never said a word, but somehow she sensed that, there was just this
Mhm.
whole storm going on inside of me.
Oh my god, that's so funny. And children are often so perceptive, and like I could totally relate because there are times where like my kids will really just kind of gather me up. Oftentimes they're telling me the same advice that I always tell them that I'm like for some reason like completely like just unable to access. So that is I could definitely relatable. Definitely relatable. So thank you. I really appreciate you for sharing that because I'm sure someone will hear this and hear your vulnerability and hear you talking about like the thoughts that almost kind of like stopped you in your tracks and really be inspired to push through and keep going, as well as like the recognition like, okay, like Dr. Gaskins-Tillett is going through these things and went through this thought process and she's still moving forward. So perhaps I can as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that I truly believe is that each of us was created on purpose for a purpose, and that, we are a designer original. There's nobody else like you, and you're here on an assignment, and nobody else has your assignment but you. And if you don't fulfill your assignment, there's a whole group of people that are not going to have what they need. And so I think that's another piece that keeps me going. When I stop to think about the people that I've helped, what would have happened to them if I hadn't kept going? I mean, even if I go back to medical school, we didn't, I kind of glossed over my medical journey. But actually, I told you I did not go straight through to from undergraduate to medical school. Well, in between, I actually, once I decided, I think it was about 3 years after I graduated that I decided to start applying to medical school. I actually applied to medical school 3 times before I was accepted. And so I could have stopped anywhere along the way and said, you know what? I have a pretty decent career already. I can just stay over here. I don't need this medicine thing. But then I think about the countless babies that I've delivered, the women whose lives I saved. I served a purpose. And so, when you have a calling, when you feel something inside that you need to keep going, it's not about you necessarily. It's about the people who you will impact, and then who they will impact, and they will impact. There's a huge ripple effect. And so I think sometimes it's hard, but sometimes bringing that to mind helps to keep you going when it gets difficult.
Yeah, this whole idea like it's not about you, and that's oftentimes like kind of something that I used to kind of ground myself when I tend to, you know, tailspin as you kind of put it. Like I try and remind myself like it's bigger than me. It's not about me. Yes, I am, tired because I got research and kids and all these things, but I'm still gonna record my podcast. Yes, I feel like I just much rather be laying on my bed, eating snacks and watching YouTube. But I'm still gonna work on my research because I fundamentally believe that it is something that I need to do. And so I really, really appreciate that and you kind of illuminating that for us. I wanted to kind of quickly go back to where you talked about transitioning from working like 60 hours a week to 36 hours a week and kind of making roughly the same amount of money. I think that is huge because, like, when you talked about questioning your thoughts and kind of those thoughts, like, there's nothing else that will provide me with the salary that I need, like that little shift in taking a step back and thinking about, well, what if there was? What if there was an alternative? And like being open to seeing a new vision, to following a different path, even though like you kind of have that thought that could potentially shut everything down. Like I love that. I know that is going to stick with so many people.
Yeah, I'm a personal development junkie at this point. And so I follow a bunch of people. So one of the people I follow is Tony Robbins. And one thing that he says all the time is that the quality of your questions determine the quality of your life. And so for me, I now ask myself questions, what I consider to be quality questions. We are products of our environment. We do the things that we've seen done. We serve the meals we've seen served. We exercise if we've seen it. If we don't, if we haven't, we don't. Those kinds of things. And so now when I do things, I ask myself why I'm doing it. Why am I doing this? What is the value of this to my life? And if it doesn't have value anymore, if it's just something that's, tradition or habit or whatever, then maybe I might want to reevaluate it. And another question that I ask myself frequently is who says? Because, they're, again, we're products of society. People will tell you what you can't be, what you can't do, who can't become, what you can't accomplish. But who says? Who says you have to do things like who says you have to go straight through to medical school? Who says once you become a doctor, that's the only thing you can ever do for the rest of your life? Who says that? You're the boss of your life. That's why my company's called Boss Lady Dream Builders. You're the boss of your life. You get to determine what you want your life to be. You don't have to subject yourself to the limitations of other people. And then the other question that I ask a lot is how can I? That's what it is. How can I? So, if we go back to the transition from full-time OBGYN to laborist work to, that significant decrease in schedule for not a significant change in money. How can I? So that's a question I ask now. Instead of saying this can't happen, that can't happen, how can I do X, Y, or Z?
I love that. That's such a beautiful way to like access your own wisdom. And I think when we're in like this kind of like panic mode or anxiety and just kind of thinking like we don't have a lot of options, that is a brilliant way to kind of like crack that and to move past that. I hadn't really thought about like this idea of like asking yourself questions and like the quality of your questions. Like something that I do is like when I'm like journaling, I'll write down everything that I'm thinking about something, and then I'll take a step back and say like, okay, what is an alternative
Mm-hmm.
way that I could be thinking about
Yeah.
this? And so that kind of helps me build some momentum. But questions, like as a researcher, I love that. Like asking yourself questions and investigating and getting curious. Like I think that is so valuable.
Yeah, and but the problem is we don't have time. So, again, if we backtrack to my epiphany on the beach, that was the first time in probably 2 years that I could hear my own voice. And that's actually why I do retreats and why my retreats are called a weekend for me, because it's an opportunity for professional women to get out of their normal surroundings, away from the responsibilities so that they have time to actually decompress and hear their own voice and hear what's being said. I'm a person of faith. I strongly believe that your purpose is inside of you. I think of personal development as really self-discovery. It's you getting more in touch with you and figuring out what's deep inside of you. And you can't do that when you're surrounded by so much noise and you're being pulled in 50 different directions. It takes getting away from it, outside of it, to be able to make those kinds of connections. Because I do believe that what you tap into in terms of asking yourself what you want, because that's another question that we almost never ask. What do I really want? It's like we just settle for life as it comes at us, but we actually get to decide. And so, asking yourself, what do you want? I think that helps you to uncover what your purpose is, because I think, what you yearn for is actually going to lead you to your purpose.
Yes, that makes so much sense. I love it. Could you tell us a little bit more about your program and like the weekend retreats that you do and like what it actually looks like as far as like what are some of the activities? What kind of like topics do you
Yeah,
explore?
yeah. So each one has been different. I'm actually preparing now for the fourth one. It's going to be in Grand Cayman at the end of October. So probably by the time this episode comes out, it may have already happened or it might be going on that week. But it's for professional women. And I let people self-identify, whatever that means to you. But usually high achieving women. I find I attract women who want more from their lives, or women who are in a time of transition and trying to figure out what their next steps might be. And so if they are typically in a tropical location, just because again, my situation happened on a beach, and I happen to love beaches, and I find water very medicinal. So even the one that wasn't at the beach was still on the water, because for me, water just helps me to decompress and to connect with myself. So, like I said, it's 3 days. So we arrive usually on Thursday evening. We have a welcome dinner and reception, and then Friday morning is when we start sessions. Our sessions are only half-day sessions, and I do that intentionally. Again, introverted introvert. But also, I find that when I'm doing deep work like that, I really need time to reflect. I can't get too much at one time. It gets overwhelming. And I don't want anybody to be overwhelmed. I want them to be able to digest what just happened in the morning, to process it, integrate it into their thinking, figure out what they want to do with it. But also, it's a weekend for me, so it's time to rest too. So I want them to have that time to rest and recharge, in addition to getting in touch with themselves. So, like I said, we spend half the day in sessions, and then the other half the day doing whatever it is you want to do. Same thing on Saturday, and then we leave on Sunday afternoon. But some of the sessions that we've done, we've looked at self-care. We look at core values. This past retreat, the last one I did was in Jamaica. And that one was really different from the others because most of those people were people who had been to previous retreats. So I felt like I could go deeper because they had the basic foundation. And so with that retreat, we looked at self-worth and worthiness. Because I think so much of, what holds us back is not believing that we're worthy of good things, not knowing who we are. And so we looked a lot at that. We looked a lot. I did a session called Check Your Receipts, because, we have this tendency to remember and hold on to all of the negativity, and the positive stuff goes away really quickly. I'll give you an example from my own life. I told you I participate in a lot of coaching, and coaches always ask, well, what were your wins for the week? So this particular week, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I didn't have any wins. I don't have any wins. And then I don't remember if it was still going on or if it was, later that day. It hit me. You don't have any wins? That was the week my student loans had been forgiven. Now, you will recall I said I graduated with a massive student loan debt. So I hit the lotto and I forgot all of the things,
Yeah.
right? Make it make sense. So, so all that to say,
Yeah, I'm like, that's just worthy of celebration, okay?
that would have been top of mind, but it was gone. It was gone. And it just, to me highlights the way that we think or don't think. We just forget about the good stuff and harp on the bad, and hold the bad forever, or the things that are, maybe not bad, but just not as positive. And so that exercise, Check Your Receipts, was about going back and looking at different stages of your life and celebrating the things you've done, looking at your actual accomplishments. So instead of this negative story that you're telling yourself, that you don't have any accomplishments, you can't do anything, you have no talents, or whatever, what did the receipts say?
Yes, I love that because that's definitely like in the realm of evident.
Yeah.
And what evidence do you have for what you're
Yeah.
thinking or what you are assuming is true? Love that. Love that. Yes. So I'm curious, like during the retreats, do the women who attend the retreats, do they tend to show any signs that they may be kind of like struggling with being away from home, being away from family, and how does that usually go? And if so, how do you kind of like approach that from like a from a leadership perspective?
See these signs of struggling to be away from family. Not for the women who actually
Nice.
come. Now I have people who will approach me and ask, "Oh, can I bring my family?" And I tell them, no, it's a weekend for you. If that's going to defeat the whole purpose of a weekend for me if you bring the family. Leave them home. It's not for them, it's for you. So, but honestly, I have not seen a struggle, because I think it's such a special environment. I can't, it's hard to articulate if you're not there. and you've not experienced it, but
Mhm.
it really is such an affirming and nurturing environment. I think for a lot of the women, it's new. It's the first time that they're able to be that vulnerable, even with themselves. So I have people who will, look at, think about some of the questions that we're asking and will, start crying because they've never asked themselves anything like this before. They had no idea that these desires were inside of them because they'd never acknowledged it. So there's this whole piece of yourself that's being left out that you get to tap into.
I love that, and I can only imagine how incredible like the vibe must be if people aren't thinking about like, well, when I get home, I got to do X, Y, and Z, and oh, my husband's home with the kids, and like that's amazing that that's not top of mind.
If any of those are thoughts, they don't share them. That's what I'm gonna say. It's interesting you should ask that. I feel like now I need to go back and ask some alums. Hey, did you miss your family?
I love that. I love that so much because I mean that kind of speaks to like the climate and the environment that you've created. If this kind of feels like a safe space to kind of let home be home and let me be in the
Right.
moment. Like that's not easy
Because
to
the thing is,
do.
some of the resistance that I hear from people as far as going to something like this is they don't want to leave their families, or they feel like, you maybe have limited time away from work or whatever, and you don't want to take that time and spend it alone, when you have a family. But working on yourself in this way is actually helping your family too, because you go back a different person. You know more about yourself. You have been refreshed from, having that self-care time, be it going to the spa, sitting by the pool, reading a book, taking lots of naps, whatever it is, you go home a different person and better able to handle some of the things that you see at home. And I know for me, one of the big things with me is I'm an example. I know my daughter is always watching. And so I want her to see that you can be anything you set your mind to be. That, you can have these thoughts, and you can take control of them. I tell her that it's like a TV station, that, if you're thinking something that's not helping, you change the channel. You don't have to stay mired in negative thoughts. You have a choice.
I love that concept. I've never heard that before. Like change the channel. I've never heard it put in that way, but that for some reason that just makes it sound so much more doable
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of times we're like, oh,
Yeah.
like you just think different thoughts, and like
And
a lot of times
again,
like that's really difficult,
again,
especially when you're like spiraling.
again, this is a gloss over. This is a gloss over, but that's actually one of the workshops that we do too. Because I think what you have to do is it's not enough to say I want to think a different thought. You actually have to have an arsenal of different thoughts at the ready. And so what we do is we actually look at some of the things that bother us, some of the negative thoughts, that because we all have these thoughts that come all the time, like our familiar thoughts, if you will. The ones that just won't leave us alone. They're there all the time. We know what they are. But if we have something that at the ready when it comes, like, no, I'm not going to think you. I'm going to think this instead. So we actually go through and create lists of the replacement thoughts so that you have something right there. Like I said, when those thoughts come, because we know they will, because they just don't go away. We know they're coming. So when they do, oh, I know you. Nope, not thinking that. I'm gonna think this instead.
So powerful. I love that. So powerful. I'm definitely going to put that into action as well. So I know we're getting a little bit short on time. So I wanted to circle around to asking you about event planning because on the Her Guided Evolution podcast, one of the things that um I like to focus on is self care and thinking about self care as multidimensional. So, like physical, social, mental, emotional, but also creative
Yeah.
self care. And so, could you tell us a little bit about like event planning, how you got into it, how, if at all, you still incorporate it into your life, even though you have all these things going
Yeah,
on?
well, the I incorporate it by way of the retreats. So I actually plan my own retreats. I don't use an event planner for them. And so
Wow.
the way I got into it, actually, I mentioned that time between undergraduate and medical school. I worked for the government, and in that capacity, I planned conferences and meetings and events. And I absolutely loved it. And so if I were not a physician, I would be, a professional event planner. So that's where the event planning part comes in. And I know lots of people who do retreats, they actually hire event planners, but I like planning my own events. For me, this is a really almost spiritual experience. I get to think about what I am trying to create and the vibe that I want to bring to the retreat. I sit down and I imagine how I want each person to feel from the time they arrive until the time they go back home. And I don't feel like somebody else would be able to capture that. Even if I told them this is what I envision, this is how I want, you know, this is how I want people to feel. I don't know that they would be able to truly capture it. Because like I said, I just have this, I want women to feel safe. I want them to feel seen. I want them to feel loved. And so, they are just showered with gifts and affirmation and wonderful things all weekend.
That is phenomenal. And I think having it's one thing to have a vision, but to also be equipped with the tools to literally bring that vision into reality. Like that's such a gift. That's such a gift. I love that.
I never thought about it that way, but thank you.
Yes, for
Thank you for
sure. I'm
giving
just
me
like
that.
it's
Thank you for giving me that perspective.
yes, you're welcome. That's something that I often think about because I started designing websites when I was in high school. Design and taught myself coding, just nerd stuff. But one of the things that I often think, like when I make a website or make a graphic or something, I'm just like, I feel so fortunate that I have the tools to like bring this vision to light because as a communication scholar, one of the things that I kind of keep in the back of my mind is that language and words, fantastic. We need them. They create our reality. So don't ever let anyone, for the audience out there, don't ever let anyone tell you that words and what people say are not important because it is. Um, but one of the things that I often think about with that is that language and articulating yourselves and things like that. Like there's always something that is that you cannot communicate
Yes.
oftentimes. And when you talked about like that vibe and the feeling that you want each woman to have, and then having to kind of like, if you weren't planning your own events, handing that over to someone else, I imagine that there are things that are going to get lost in
Yeah.
translation or misconstrued. So I think that is phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. So for now, I'm gonna continue to plan myself.
Well, Dr. Sherita, this has been fantastic. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I can't wait for like the listeners to hear your perspective. I know like there were several times in this conversation that, you kind of made me tear up a bit. So I know it's going to be a fantastic episode for folks to listen to. But can you tell us where we can find you, where we can learn more, where we can just kind of become active in your world?
Absolutely. So I would love to invite all of you to join the Boss Lady Dream Builders Facebook community. So, it's a free space. I put lots of content in there despite the algorithms. So you may not see them unless you go in there specifically to look. But definitely the Facebook community. I'm on all social media platforms. So I'm not Threads. I haven't done that yet, but most of the social media platforms.
Sounds
I'm on
great.
Facebook, Instagram, um, LinkedIn, a little bit on TikTok. And then I also have a YouTube channel where you can find, so you mentioned that I do the weekly live show. So you can find my live shows recordings on the YouTube channels, Boss Lady Dream Builders. And then also my short videos, it's just different, live videos or whatever that I've done are also there. So that's a good place as well. But I'm always happy to connect. I'm happy to help. And then I would love, 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 love to host you guys at a weekend for me. So you can find that on my website. Again, Boss Lady Dream Builders. Everything is pretty consistent. Boss Lady Dream Builders. You can actually the a weekend for me. You can actually also access that just from aweekendforme.com. But Boss Lady Dream Builders will get you there as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. This was fantastic. And of course, everyone who is listening on the podcast, the audio version, check the show notes. If you are watching on YouTube, check the description box. I'll put all of Dr. Sherita's links there. Thank you so much once again, Dr. Sherita. This was amazing. And I really appreciate you taking some time to hang out with us on the Her Guided Evolution
You are so
podcast.
welcome. It was my honor. I love having conversations like this. And thank you for what you do
Yes,
and this platform and inspiring women to evolve.
thank you. I really appreciate that.